Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're painting this sweet wintry snow scene of swans with the snow falling using salt and a bit of white watercolor. To start out, I'm making a puddle of just water and then I'm adding the blue that I'm using for the background. I have read that indigo blue is one of the best blues to use with salt. This isn't an indigo blue. It is just called blue in the Rosa Gallery Botanical Collection, but it also works very well with the salt. And what I'm doing is I'm using my quill brush that holds a lot of water and paint, and I am making sure to create a nice area full of saturated paint. So I'm going back in, and while it's still wet, I'm adding even more of that blue to the wet area of paint. If it dries on you, just go ahead and go over the whole thing again with the water and the paint so that it is wet again for this next step. And then I rinse off my brush just because I like to keep my colors separate. You don't have to. And I'm going into that black. In the Rosa Gallery collection is called Grape Black, but you can use any black that is in your set of watercolor paints. And I'm dabbing that black into the still very wet blue of the background to make it look like it is the horizon line and some trees in the distance. And then I'm making some horizontal lines, horizontal stripes in the water area to show a little bit of texture in the water, a little bit of movement in the water. And as it is still very wet, it will have that wet on wet, very soft look to it as it dries. When it's still wet, you're going to take your salt. Table salt will work. This salt that I had on hand has a bit of larger flakes of salt, which I liked for this. And you're going to sprinkle it liberally all around your wet painting so that as it dries, the salt will soak up that paint, that water into it. And when it's completely dry, it will look like snowflakes falling from the sky onto your pond area. And you can see that there are no real distinct lines. It's kind of misty looking, kind of like you're looking through a snowstorm. And what I'm doing now is I've dipped my Q-tip or cotton swab in water, dabbed it on a paper towel, and now I've dabbed just a little circle onto the paper, and this will represent the swan's head. And after dabbing that circle, I picked it up with the paper towel, and then doing it again so that it's just a little bit more white. I picked up a little bit more of that paint onto the tip of the Q-tip, and I picked it up with the paper towel. And now I'm getting the other side of the Q-tip wet, so there's no paint on this side of the Q-tip. And I'm making a little swoop down from that circle of the head into the water, and I'm picking it back up with the paper towel. So you're getting your painting that's completely dry, you're getting it wet with your Q-tip, and where you get it wet, you're able to pick that back up with your paper towel, and underneath it won't be completely white, but it will be a lighter shade of blue, which will really stand out against the dark background. And now I'm adding just a little swoop for where you see the start of the body coming out of the water. And then I'm going to make a shape like a little hill, a little bump, a little hump, a little hill. So we're going up and over. And then I'm going to make a little tail at the base of it. And then on the bottom side, you're just making a straight line. So it's like you're going up and over for the body of the swan, and then a straight line where the swan's body has hit the water. So you're just making this little hump and then a little pointed tail at the back. I'm now taking a new Q-tip and getting it wet and picking up another layer of paint so that it'll be a little bit brighter on the paper. It will stand out just a little bit more, be a little bit lighter. So we're taking that water and getting the swan's body wet one more time and picking it up with a paper towel so you can see the body coming up, popping out from the background just a little bit more. And now we're going to make a little circle for the cygnet or baby swan, the little head, just rubbing a little circle for the head, picking it back up with a paper towel, and then making little swiping motions because you just want a little tiny body. And then picking that back up with the paper towel, dipping a new Q-tip in. If it gets too much paint on your Q-tip, you want to swap it out for a new one so that you're not adding paint to the painting. You're able to take paint away from the painting. So just a little dot for the head, little circle for the head, and then little swishes for the body. So you're removing just a little bit of paint from the area for the body of the cygnet or the baby swan. And I initially meant to do the 7 swans a swimming, but I ended up with just 6 swans somehow. But if you want to do the 7 swans a swimming, you'll just add one more little baby swan into your painting. So now I'm adding one more swan who's riding on its mom's back, just the same way, the little head and then the little swish for the body. So there's my 6th swan. So you'll just add one more if you want to do the 7 swans a swimming. For some reason, in my mind, I was thinking 6 swans a swimming. I'm not sure how that happened. So for our next step, I am getting, with a number 2 round brush, I'm getting a lot of that white paint on my brush. And this is the titanium white from the Rosa Gallery botanical set. But you can use any white that you have. You can also use a white gouache. It doesn't have to be watercolor, or white acrylic. Either will work. And once I have enough loaded up on my brush, you want it to be very thick. The thicker it is, the whiter it will look, the more it will pop out of the page, the more it'll stand out. And I did just a swoop down the front of the neck, and then a swoop following the line of the body. And now I'm just doing little swishes for feathers, and you can make as many or as few feathers as you would like. I looked at many photos of swans online just to see what the feathers might look like, but it's really just for my imagination, just my interpretation, so feel free to make it look however you want. And now I'm doing a little circle for that cheek of the swan, and I'm placing it just towards the left-hand base of that circle of the head, and then doing a little highlight on the top of the head as well. Then I go back into that titanium white with my number 2 round brush and add just a little bit more to those highlights. The thicker the white paint you put on, the whiter it looks, and the more it looks like it's glowing. So then I'm adding just a little bit more of that titanium white, my little puddle of white, which is actually very thick. It's not the tea consistency. It is very thick, as you want it to be opaque so that the white really stands out and pops off the page. We are doing a highlight on the top, the head of the cygnet, along the body, the feathers, a little bit in the front, and just a little bit where the feathers in the back would be. Each signet I do pretty much the same way, with a little highlight along the body, a little highlight on the top of the head, and a little highlight where the tail and the feathers are. I sped this part up a bit as each one is done pretty much the same way. So now we are making a little triangle for the beak of the swan. I am doing it with the white paint, as we are going to be using our metallic gold on top of the white. So you might want to wait a few minutes for that white paint to dry a bit, and then go into your gold metallic paint. If you don't have gold metallic paint, you can use an orange or kind of a golden watercolor. But this one is a metallic gold. And for this, it's the Winsor & Newton set. It takes a little bit of work to get that gold out of the pan. So you really have to kind of massage it with your brush with a lot of water on your brush, but not too much water because you want it to be nice and thick and opaque. You could also use a metallic gouache if you would like, because that is like a really thick watercolor and it's just easier to get a lot of on your brush. But I really enjoy using these metallic watercolors. And I go over that little triangle that we have made for the beak so that it adds a little sparkle to the beak. And we're also going to use it for the crown. The crown that we're making has just 4 little lines which all come together at the base. Just teeny tiny little lines. You can definitely skip this part, but I thought it was a fun, magical addition. So I'm making just those 4 little lines that are coming together at the base to make the crown. And once this dries, you can go over it again if it looks a little bit dull and not as sparkly as you would like it to be. Then I'm going into that black grape color. You can use any black that you have. And I'm really trying to make it as thick as I can so that it will show up really well against that dried white that we have already put down. Dab your brush on a paper towel or try it out on a scrap piece of paper, and then you make just the tiniest little dot for an eye, and then you bring that area from the eye down to meet the beak, and that will give you the look of a swan. For the signets, I made just the tiniest little dot for the eye and a little tiny line or swoop for the beak. The next thing we will do is wash out your brush, and with just water, we're creating the look of the reflection of the little signets in the water with just a couple swipes of your brush, or a few swipes of your brush will get that little area wet so it looks like the reflection on the water, and then pick it right back up with a paper towel. This way it is subtle, but it gives you that feeling of a reflection on the water. And then for the mama swan as well, we'll do the same thing. And we're just getting that area wet right underneath her. And then a few little lines out towards you, and then picking those back up with a paper towel. Adding a few more, just so that it looks like the water might be moving gently, and you see a bit of the reflection of the swan on the water. And there you have it. Now, to make it look like the swan is floating on the water, you'll also want to create a bit of a shadow. So to do this, you'll mix the blue in with the black, mix them together, and then you'll paint a line, a very thin line, just underneath the white swan's body, and you'll create this line for the mother swan as well as all the baby swans so that it looks like they're floating in the water. All right, I think it's looking beautiful. The next step is just to add a little bit more of that winter magic by making it snow. And this time I got my brush nice and wet, and I'm making that white paint puddle a little bit thinner with more water and testing it out. You can test it out on a scrap of paper. I'm testing mine out on a little piece of cardboard just to make sure I like the way that it's splattering from this number 2 round brush. You can use a toothbrush, you can use a longer thin brush so that it has a lot of spring to it, so you get more or fatter drops or fatter snowflakes. But I liked this more of a delicate look for this painting. It just depends what you like for your painting. And I'm using a heavy piece of silverware to gently tap on the brush and make that splatter from the brush so that it looks like little snowflakes falling from the sky. You can also use a heavier brush, just anything that you can kind of gently tap that paintbrush and make it snow. If you want your highlights to pop out just a little bit more, you can load up your brush one more time with some of that white that you have. I'm using the titanium white. You can use whatever white that you have, or maybe even a white gouache, and go over the highlights that you've already put down so that they're just a little bit thicker, a little bit more opaque, so that that bright white jumps off the page and it really makes it look like they're glowing. Now our very last step is to go back in with that same number 2 round brush, and we are putting in just a little tiny shadow, a little swoop, a little line just right underneath that crown so that it looks a little bit more three-dimensional, and we're done. If you get a chance to try this out, please let me know. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. I would love to see what you do.